I never set out to be a cyber hate expert. It actually found me. So I worked for the ABC for many years. And in 2010, I was the ABC's Drive presenter based in Cairns in far north Queensland. And one of the things I realised was that the LGBTIQ plus community up there was having a really hard time. It's quite a conservative community. And I've just always been someone who's really passionate about social justice. So I wanted to tell these very human stories about that community and the hard time that they were having. One of the 9 stories I did in that series was a story about a gay couple, 2 men, Mark Newton and Peter Truong. And they told me that they had had this child via surrogacy in Russia. And I did what ostensibly was a really nice human feature about that family. I spent a long time with that little boy and so forth. And then I was actually pregnant at the time. My stint in Cairns ended. I came back to Canberra with my then husband. We've since separated, but was in Canberra for a couple of years. And then what happened was those 2 men got charged and convicted as members of an international paedophile ring. And it turned out that that little boy that I had spent so much time with, he was actually purchased from his Russian mother. He was not born via surrogacy, as they had told me. And they had just perpetrated these horrendous crimes against that little boy. And I mean, look, it's still really hard for me to even talk about that today, because I think about him all the time and wonder what has happened to him, because he was shared with a whole paedophile ring in numerous different countries. So, you know, I don't really know how his life is turning out, but what I can tell you was the bit that happened to me was once those men were convicted, or even when they were charged, I just started to become subject of this orchestrated online hate campaign. So there was basically one man in the States, quite a prominent journalist and blogger called Robert Stacey McCain, and he was really inciting his thousands and thousands of followers to shame me. And essentially the suggestion was that I should pay for what I had done, and that I was somehow to blame for the crimes against the child. And so the way it unfolded was this streams of hatred kind of coming into my social media accounts. And then the 2 things that just are really clear in my mind is I got a death threat. So I got this tweet saying your life is over. And I mean, I'm not very techie, so I didn't realize my tweets were geolocated. And so you could actually click on my house on Google Maps. Like there was a little arrow sort of underneath my tweets. And then at the same time, my then husband found a picture of our family on a fascist website. So there was a photo that we took for sort of a holiday greeting card, essentially, of me, my 2-year-old. I was pregnant with my second daughter by then, and my husband. And there was just all this kind of anti-Semitic hatred underneath it. And the combination of those things together, like the death threat and this kind of full-on anti-Semitism, you know, my grandparents fled the Holocaust. A lot of members of my family died in the Holocaust. It was just a really threatening environment. So that's actually where it started. I never wanted to be involved in that world. The cyber hate died down after about 18 months. And then I guess because I'm really bloody minded and, you know, I'm a bit like a bull in a china shop sometimes, I just started to think, like, why would you send someone you don't know a death threat? Who are these people? And that's where the journey really started. So this is a really confusing thing, because basically trolling is currently used in such a wide context, we don't really know what it means. So the way that trolling is currently used in public discourse, it's any circumstance in which one person is needling another person. It could be online, it could be offline. The definition is essentially really loose, and it's problematic because if you are an extreme cyber hate target and you go to the police station and say your life is under threat, they just think, oh, ha ha, you're being trolled. So it's very problematic. what I realized after looking at this for 5 years is that this is really a spectrum of behavior. So at one end, you have mild pranks, which can be funny and quite hilarious. Things like a Rick roll, where you accidentally click on a link and it's a Rick Astley song. You know, that's hilarious. Doesn't do anyone any harm. It's a joke. Great. At the other end, you have extreme predator trolling. And these are really behaviors that are linked to all kinds of crimes like terrorism, incitement to suicide, real life stalking, and assault. So what I did was I decided to define what I call predator trolling. And really what I mean by that is people are using the internet or digital devices to do real life harm to other people. And it might be one person that's predator trolling you, or it might be a group. And when I say real life harm, I'm talking about psychological harm, physical harm, or both. So the clearest example I give to people, because people really fail to understand this, they think that the internet is a sort of virtual fairyland and they can't understand how it could do real life harm. There is a journalist in my book called Sherelle Moody. She's amazing. She's a News Corp journalist, but she also runs the Red Heart campaign, and that's a campaign against gendered violence. And the cyber hate she gets on a daily basis is just so extreme. So I interviewed her for the book about a chapter on misogyny. And then a few days later, I got this email from her in real time saying, someone's threatened to kill my horse, Frank. And then a couple of days after that, she said to me that Frank had been found dead in a nearby paddock. And so the other thing that happened, just lots of awful things have happened to her and her partner because of online hatred. But, you know, her dog was given acid and the whole inside of its mouth was burned out. Her dog survived. But I think you can really clearly see from that example, like, it does not stay online. And that's what I mean by predator trolling. So this is a really problematic question in a kind of a way, because we're basically saying, what should the victim do to stop the trolling? What should the victim do in response? And one of the ways I try to get people to understand this is like saying to a domestic violence victim, what did you do to cause the violence against you? Actually, it's not the victim that should be in charge of stopping this. It's actually society. So the questions I would ask is, what do we do to stop the predators doing it? What do we do to stop the perpetrators doing it? Why aren't the social media companies keeping us safe? Why hasn't the government legislated so that the social media companies have to have a duty of care towards us? You know, in Germany, they have a law, I think it's called NetzDG, and it's got one of those long German names, you know, but those companies are charged 50 million euros if they don't take cyber hate down each post in 24 hours. Now, Human Rights Watch has said that it is cooling free speech too much. But what I will say is that law is definitely stopping cyber hate. So governments can take decisive action if they want to, but they're not. And what are the police doing? You know, internationally, the police are failing at this. They are not regulated, trained. They don't know what the laws are. They're not resourced. They don't have the tech skills. So there are things that victims can do or try to do, but I'm always really cautious of advising victims because I don't think it's their job. It's like blaming a rape victim for walking down the street on that particular night. Actually, we should all be safe on the internet, and we should all be able to enjoy the benefits that it brings. And, you know, the problem here as well is that predator trolls, who they're not universally men, but the ones in my book are basically white supremacist young men. They are deliberately trying to maintain a position at the top of the food chain, or their perceived position. And they target women, minorities, Jews, all sorts of religious and ethnic groups, disabled people. They are targeting people. So if you are suggesting that the victim is responsible, it's problematic. You know, we don't want an internet where the victim has to try and keep themselves safe. We want a structure where we can all enjoy the benefits of the internet. What I would say is that the Holocaust didn't start with people being gassed at Auschwitz or the other concentration camps. It started with words. And we know through decades of research that dehumanizing language against specific groups makes those groups more likely to be the targets of violence. So this is always true in genocides and other things. We saw this in Rwanda. We've seen this in many situations where specific ethnic or religious groups are targeted. First of all, we start with propaganda, with denigration and so forth. We other those people, and then those people become the targets of violence. This is exactly what is happening on the internet. This is exactly why, say, the Daily Stormer troll army. So that's a really right-wing website in the States. They have a troll army. They were responsible for the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville a few years ago where Heather Hoyer was died. It started with those people being wound up on the Daily Stormer website. It started with denigrating language and so forth, and it heated up to the point where there were riots and people got killed and other people got really badly injured. So we are absolutely kidding ourselves if we think it's just words on the internet. I mean, what do we think radicalization is? You know, these trolls, people like the Christchurch killer, what happens is they are getting radicalized as little kids. So there's a chapter in my book called The Internet Was My Parent. And what it describes is little boys mainly left alone on the internet from, say, somewhere between 10 and 16, completely unparented. So there's no loving parents around hugging them, kissing them, giving dinners to them, giving lunches to them, helping with the homework. There's nobody. They're from white trash families, usually very neglectful families, violent families. These kids are sat there on the cesspits of the internet, so 4chan, N-chan, Reddit, Tumblr, imbibing white supremacy, imbibing all these different kinds of hatred, misogyny, and so forth. And they get radicalized into trolling. And they turn into the Christchurch killer. That's exactly what happened to him. That was exactly what happened to him as a little boy. So the thing is, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me? No. Actually, the opposite is true. We know that. We just have to look at history. The problem here is that you have monolithic private companies, Facebook, Twitter, all these tech platforms, and they are not accountable to the public. So the thing is, right, we need to think about this because somehow they've got off scot-free. Somehow we're always asking, what does the individual do? Whose fault is it? And so forth. But actually, these are huge companies making billions of dollars from our data, paying no tax, and they are profiting from our misery. So when something like the Christchurch killing happens and you get this massacre, which is live online, what happens? Hundreds of thousands of people all over the world jump on because they want to see this vision. And who makes money from that? Facebook makes money from it. And they say they want to keep us safe, but they don't, because if they did, they wouldn't keep us safe. They don't because it would interrupt their profit motive. So the thing is, the single most effective thing, I think, to keep people safe would be legislating a duty of care against. So the platforms have to keep us safe. And like what Germany's done, they fine them billions of euros if they don't. Because at the moment, it's just up to individuals, and we can see what's happening. What's happening is the most sadistic members of our society and the most damaged members of our society are implementing white supremacy. And that's not a future that anyone wants. Like, the internet was designed to be this kind of democratic platform where we could all share information and have a voice. And what has happened? The diametric opposite. It's not this utopia that the tech companies kind of posit. It's actually a hellhole, and it's kind of descending into this I mean, it's a terrible future if we keep going how we're going at the moment, you know, and I don't know why. It's absolutely baffling. I don't know why, particularly the Australian government won't legislate. Like, the adult cyber abuse scheme is currently draft legislation designed to protect adults, which I'm really pleased about. But that legislation doesn't have, it's all voluntary codes for the platforms. Why? It's madness. I mean, the other thing is, I would say we all do have a part to play in this as well. We all should be more civil than we are, and we all can implement social norms if we want to. And I quite often do that. Like, we all need to be aware that there's a troll in all of us. Each one of us has been more aggressive online than we should be. And that's because of the online disinhibition effect. So when you're on the internet, you can't see the other person. You don't see their social cues. You don't have a social contract with them. It's gamified. And so you are tempted often to be more aggressive. So yeah, like, there's an individual part we can play, but also society has to keep us safe. It's fairly naive to think that the best side of humanity is going to blossom without any structures there, isn't it? I mean, what evidence do we have for that this utopia was going to come out of this? I don't think that human history shows that, you know. I mean, you just have to walk around the Holocaust Museum in Washington to know that that is not true. And the reason that we have sophisticated institutions in a democracy where you have parliaments and laws and police and so forth is because we need it. We need it to maintain civil society. So to think that we don't need that on the internet, so, you know, it's ludicrous, right? Like, I think it's ludicrous. I mean, I went to see Vince Cerf talk. He was one of the fathers of the internet. I went to see him a couple of years ago, the ANU, when I was writing the book. And you know, he created with a team, he made the internet. It was originally the APRANET. And his kind of naive optimism about it was quite staggering. Like, yes, they were visionaries in the sense that they made the internet, and where would we be without it? It's an incredible tool. But like, did you really think we were all just going to get on and be happy families and be nice to each other? I mean, what is the evidence for that? I do want to say, though, that, like, I'm not a hater of social media and of the internet, or even of trolling. Like, I think that trolling can serve some really useful functions. For example, I saw, one of my favorite examples is I saw Pauline Hanson put out this tweet a little while ago now, and she was calling for examples of white racism. And the trolling was so funny. I actually ended up crying with laughter. You know, and I was trolling her as well. I wrote back and said, I'm so white that my brown friends only want to go out with me at night to use me as a torch, you know. And people were writing things like, I can't get the mayonnaise I like, so I have to go to Ashfield, #white racism. And literally thousands of people trolled her back, like, and it was hysterically funny. So, like, that's a mechanism that Australians, you know, we've got a great sense of humor as a nation, we're using to make a political point, right? And even with my book, what happened was, I mean, I never dreamed it was going to be as violent, but I also didn't dream anyone was going to read it and it would kind of become internationally, you know, viral as well. People started taking selfies with the book all over the world, and often with their animals. So like little rabbits and horses and things. And I was like, what the hell is happening here, right? I get thousands and thousands of that. Like, I couldn't post them all, you know. And I realized, like, I had really bad PTSD from writing the book because it was so violent, and, you know, there's anti-Semitism in it that's really deep, and people were getting shot in real time, and I became very alcoholic. So to get these photos, it was like the community around the world was giving me this huge virtual hug. And first of all, I was like, what the hell is happening? Like, why are people sending me, here's the book with my horse and my rabbit and, you know, all these animals? And I was like, oh, this is love. This is the community saying to me, thank you for what this book means, and we want this to change too. We want to fix this. So, you know, it can tear us apart, but it can also bring us together.